I've been back about a week now.
How does it feel? I mean, is it an adjustment to sort of return to, the normal world and kind of your daily activities after an experience like that?
Um, yeah, it is a bit, first and foremost, I feel honored to have been able to participate and assist. Um, I also feel a little bit guilty often when I come back from trips like this because the work is never really done. And sometimes you feel like you're leaving your family and your friends and your neighbors, and they're not recovered yet. They're not fully recovered yet. However, I also, and then I also feel guilty sometimes because I come back to a house with stuff and family and friends, and this is when you really realize you've got way too much stuff, right? But then I also come back with a sense of faith that the next wave of helpers, whether they're Red Cross or from other organizations, are going to pick up and continue on with the long-term work that needs to be done yet. And then I also have faith that the people will recover. It'll take time, but they will recover to their new normal. And one of the things I liked about that article I forwarded on to you was that it talked about how, it takes time and it takes thought, but you can often rebuild your lives. You still have lost your house, you may have lost your family members, you lost all of your stuff, but you can rebuild your lives to a new normal. So
Sure. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Right.
And I liked that part too. Now, you mentioned, this awareness of, just how much stuff you have after you return to kind of your own place. And, we're really talking about, people who are obviously rebuilding their whole lives. I mean, does that put something like, you spent your holiday break over there. Does that put something like, Christmas into perspective for you?
Absolutely. If we think about Christmas and its origins, and its true meaning, it is being thankful and sharing, and it's about people, and it's about relationships, and it's about respect for each other and love for each other. And it's not the stuff, it's not the presents and the fancy wrappings and the Christmas tree and who can have the biggest, fanciest meal, and who gets the best presents or the most number of presents or whatever. It's not that at all. It's about loving and sharing and caring and being together. So yeah, it kind of reminds you that let's go back to the basics. Let's go back to walking alongside each other, with sharing each other's burden, with celebrating each other's success. So, it takes you right back to those things.
Sure. And I mean, to me, it seems like you're sort of living that message. Really, when it comes down to it, you missed Christmas with your, presumably your own relatives to be down there helping these folks out. Did you have any kind of a belated celebration or what? I guess tell me how your homecoming played out.
Okay. Well, my homecoming, I didn't come back directly to Grand Rapids. My family is actually from that state that shall not be named. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. So,
Okay.
So hopefully you won't hold that against me.
Boo, no.
I know. And you're not allowed to put this on the news. Okay. I'm not a sports fan at all. So I grew up in the town for which Ohio State comes from. And to not be a sports fan or an Ohio State fan, that's criminal, in Columbus. So, and then I moved to Michigan, and then I'm in the outcast here too, because I come from that state and actually from that town. So, it's not safe to share that very often. But anyway, I flew back to my mom's home, and we celebrated there. And it's interesting that when I let my mom know ahead of time that I was going down, because she's 86 and she worries about everything and everybody. And so I called her and I said, Mom, is it okay if we don't come for Christmas? And maybe I'll come the first week in January, so I can go down to Kentucky. And she said, well, it's about time. I thought you were going to go down there. So she's like, she and her card club friends all kind of live vicariously through me when I go on these trips. And it just makes me giggle, because she and her friends want to know, well, when is she going? They hear about a disaster. And before I even know it's happened, they're like, well, is Louise going to, fill in the spot of the disaster? As if I'm the only person in the whole universe that does this kind of work. And I'm like, Mom, no, I have something else I have to do right now. Or, there are other people who can take care of, wherever it is. So it's kind of funny. And then my sister and my nephew also just, I think because I can go and they can't. They have family needs and both are working, that you can't just drop and go most of the time. So they kind of live vicariously through me. And, my Christmas presents end up being things like solar powered flashlights and, and,
That's hilarious.
solar powered phone chargers and things that I've actually not had to use, because, for instance, with this one, with tornadoes, there's an edge to it. So, your house may be destroyed, but 2 houses over is still okay. And within a couple of days, they have power. So I haven't had to use all of that solar power. So if you need any, Charlie, feel free to reach out. I have some.
Well, hey, in the event of an apocalypse, I know who to reach out to. So.
There you go. There you go.
Well, no, Louise, that sounds great. I'm sure, everybody was happy to see you. And yeah, I'm sure it's, again, I'm sure it's quite the adjustment getting home after all of that.
Right.
Everything you've seen and everything you've done. And I take it you maybe make a few friends while you're down, doing these.
You do.
missions.
You do. One of the people who, couple of disasters, actually, when I was in Puerto Rico, I was terribly frustrated. It just felt like nothing was working right, and I couldn't do the job I thought I was supposed to do. And one of the fellows who was kind of in charge of the disaster response there said, Louise, stop. When there's a disaster, it's a disaster. And we're putting up a multi-million-dollar business in 2 days with people who've never worked together before. And then in 2 or 3 weeks, the entire workforce flips over. People go home and a whole new group of people come in who've never worked together before. So it's amazing that the work actually gets done, because, you need to feed people. Well, golly gee, the roads are destroyed, or the power's off and the grocery stores had to throw away everything, all the meat, all the eggs, everything in the freezer because the power's been off for too long. Or, there are no gas stations that are working, or whatever it is that you need to be able to complete the mission, or to, you know, to provide the help that you want to help, or you know you need to provide. You know, even as, you know, if we think back to even just this past summer when there was the Ferguson apartment fires this summer in August, you know, it took a while to find a place to have people stay when they couldn't go into the back into their apartments for a day, because the places we had lined up had been, somebody had moved in already, or something else was happening there, or the building had been torn down already, or, you know, all those things that you planned ahead of time. When the disaster actually happens, though, the tools and the resources may not be available at that particular time. So it can be very frustrating and overwhelming, but it's almost, it's amazing the work that actually gets done when a disaster happens. Even though as a responder, we want to, you know, and as a nurse, you know, I want all of the tools that I would normally have. I want all of the resources that I would normally have, but I have to remind myself, Louise, this is a disaster. Those things aren't necessarily going to be available at that time. So it requires you to tap into your creativity and to think outside of the box. You know, okay, I don't have this, so how might I solve this particular problem? What resources might be available? What alternative method might I be able to use to meet this particular need? And it's kind of an adventure to be able to function that way. And it's a great learning opportunity. You think, oh, wow, I can tuck that in the back of my head. That worked. Maybe I can use that again in the future sometime.
Sure. I mean, if nothing else, it's an exercise in using your critical thinking skills.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And for those that are getting older, it makes those brain cells work so we don't lose them as quickly. So
staying sharp, right?
Yeah, that's the neurological nurse in me coming in.
All right. Now, Louise, refresh my memory. Where exactly were you stationed?
I was stationed in Mayfield.
Okay. Now, I know you said initially, you know, the locals obviously aren't, you know, are accustomed to being very self-sufficient, aren't necessarily, you know, eager to accept the help. What ultimately did they tell you? Did you hear from them? I mean, were there any comments made?
Well, it wasn't that they weren't willing to accept help. It was that they were being self-sufficient, and it was challenging to find them to be able to reach out. And you know, typically in a disaster, well, let me back it up just a second. In a disaster response, there are tons of organizations that play in this disaster world. And everybody way above my level of function, the leaders from all of these different organizations work together and have kind of subdivided, okay, who's responsible for what? You know, there are organizations that'll help you muck out your basement. There are organizations that actually come in the first couple of hours with chainsaws and clear the roads and clear the, you know, start to work on rebuilding the bridges and checking out if the bridges are actually working right, and those kinds of things. And then there are people who come in a little bit later and help actually rebuild. There are folks who will dig through the rubble with you and help you clean pictures, family pictures. And so everybody has a piece that is their level of expertise. And typically with the Red Cross early on, our focus is safety and security. So having a warm place to stay, having food, having some medical care, having clothing, you know, those kinds of things. And then kind of helping support you to move on to the next stage, to start to think about how you're going to start your recovery. And then other people come in, other organizations come in later and help move forward with that. So for us, if you think about, that's our primary kind of job early on in the disaster response world. Typically that is sheltering. Well, we didn't really have very many people show up for shelters. And we know there's a heck of it, there were over 1,000 homes actually totally obliterated. And so we know there should be people out there, and it was a matter of trying to find them. And then once we found the way to find them, then started to provide some more resources. We got them connected up into the Red Cross kind of database or organization, so that then we can start to provide a little bit of financial support based on the donations that came in response to this disaster, to be able to provide mental health support as a nurse, to help with supporting folks with medical needs. Did you lose your prescriptions in the fire or in the tornado? Did you lose medical equipment in the tornado? How can we help you get that stuff replaced? Trying to figure out if insurance won't replace something, how can we navigate the system to try and get medical equipment and prescriptions and eyeglasses and hearing aids and dentures and all those kinds of things replaced. Because if you can't see well and you can't hear well and you can't get to the bathroom safely, then you can't even think about how to take the next couple of steps to start your recovery.
Sure,
So
Maslow's hierarchy, right?
Absolutely.
Well,
That's
again,
kind of,
I think it's nothing short of admirable, and I think that everybody down there is, whether they received help or not, is more than appreciative for the timely attention
absolutely.
and all of
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. Yep. There, with COVID, we have to wear masks and keep distanced just like everybody else. So it's hard. Most of us as disaster responders, and especially as nurses, we tend to hug, and we like physical contact is very, very important when you're struggling. So that's very difficult, but virtual hugs, air hugs, were happening all over the place. People were very, very thankful. Little texts or notes back, oh, thank you so much for helping with this. And even though, helping get somebody's eyeglasses replaced, you're like, well, that wasn't very much in the scope of the universe. But to that particular person, it was very important at that moment, and to be able to help meet those needs, it just reaffirms why we're on this planet. We're taking care of each other, we're friends and we're family, and we're neighbors. We just happen to be a little bit further down the road.
Beautifully said, Louise. Any parting thoughts? Anything else you'd like to share?
If just that if anybody has the ability or the desire or the passion to try and help, even if they don't know what kind of things they might be able to help with, the Red Cross has all sorts of opportunities for all levels and for all people. And then, if Red Cross doesn't float your boat, there's tons of other organizations out there.